I now have the great pleasure of introducing our second speaker, Mr. Winston McQuade. Winston has been involved in the arts for 30 years. He spent most of his career at Radio-Canada, where he hosted such television programs as L'Heure de Pointe, Telex Art, Winston dans les Îles, and Winston Reçoit. For radio, he hosted Les Belles Heures, Radar, Les Coups de Théâtre, and Multimédiar. He has interviewed hundreds of artists and artisans in the fields of visual arts, literature, dance, and theater, both at Radio-Canada and at such major events as the Festival d'Avignon, the Festival de Théâtre des Amériques, the Biennale de Montréal, the Festival International de Nouvelle Danse, and the Carrefour International de Théâtre de Québec. You may have heard him actually at the Rogers Cup last August. Once you hear his voice, you'll know that it sounds familiar. He is the recipient of the Rogers Communication Media Award for coverage of the arts. 10 years ago, he decided to leave Radio-Canada to devote himself to a career as a professional artist, thus renewing a passion for the visual arts that inspired him during his days at the École des Beaux-Arts de Québec in the late 60s. In particular, he has focused on the topographical landscape of Montreal, presenting his abstract meanderings, as he calls them, at various galleries and in situ projects. A member of the Association des Critiques de Théâtre du Québec for several years, Winston McQuade is a member of the Regroupement pour les Artistes en Arts Visuels de Québec and established the Fondation Serge Lemoyne for visual artists in conjunction with Alain Lacourcière. Winston has been an ardent supporter of our cause for many years. He goes on the road. Ça marche? He goes on the road with us often across the province of Quebec, educating people about prostate cancer and sharing his journey. And tonight, he is going to share his journey on prostate cancer with us. Winston?
Thank you so much, Malvina. I was also a sport jock. I covered football, hockey, and whatever with Jean Paget, who is a confrère of mine, and we've worked at Radio-Canada for many years. And actually, it's, first of all, good evening. And it's great to see you here. We had 30 people that wanted to come like sometime this week, and now there's over 100 of you. So it's great to see you. I will finish off by saying about Jean Paget that he introduced me to Procure 10 years ago. And as Jean, I was diagnosed with cancer in 202, operated in 203 for, they removed it. The only regret I have is that it's so long ago that I can't have little parts of me there in Quebec and Sherbrooke and Montreal. So those of you who have that possibility of using the biobank, it's great. I was diagnosed in 202, operated radically in 203, was fine, and then in 205, cancer came back. So I had radiotherapy for a full month and came out of that, and this is 212, so things have been going pretty good. What I would like to talk to you about tonight is fear. Fear and not to be afraid of it. Because I think that if you know someone or if yourself have been diagnosed with cancer, the first reaction is fear. Fear of what? Fear of the unknown, a fear of suffering, fear of loss of life, and not knowing where to go and how to handle the damn thing. So I was lucky enough to be in the hands of Fred Saad, who's a renowned doctor in the field. And he's the one that told me, and accompanying me was my wife, of course. And he was so gentle about it, but at the same time, you walk out of the office, and he gave me all briefly the information I needed to know. And I wasn't even listening. I wasn't listening because I was afraid. I was afraid I was going to die. I mean, cancer is not the word you want to hear when you're 50 some odd, almost 60 years old, and you have a life behind you, you have children, you have a family, you have a career. The last thing you want to hear about is the awful word. So everybody is scared. I mean, if you are, I mean, it's normal, everybody is. But how not to be afraid of fear is another matter. And how do you go about that? Well, I think you have to, first of all, to turn up your sleeves, open your computer, shop around, get all the information you can possibly handle. Ask for advice. Ask to see your doctor again because you didn't really understand what he was talking about when he told you that you had cancer. You need to go back. You need to talk. You need information. You need people that you're going to trust that will tell you the right thing. I thought I had heard everything, and I didn't know, for example, and nobody had told me that I would not ejaculate anymore after my prostate had been taken out. I found that out, and I found it weird that at that time I wasn't told that amongst the possibilities of cure, there was that. I mean, I could not procreate again. And I have 5 children, and maybe I would have liked to have more, but it wasn't really the issue of having more children, but more the issue of not getting all the information. And not having all the information is as bad as not having information at all. So let's go back. Let's go back and see the doctor. Let's go back and talk to him. What are the possibilities of getting rid of this thing? Is it take it out? Is it radiotherapy? Is it advanced enough to get to even consider chemotherapy? What are the options out there? So slowly you start getting that information, but you don't want it just from one source. You might want the information coming from different sources. You might, of course, you're going to go on the net. Everybody goes on the web, and there's so many things out there on the web, and so many of them are contradictory. They don't necessarily, come together with this. They don't define things the same way. The language is not necessarily, the words, the vocabulary is not necessarily the same to whoever you talk to. So I went to see a second doctor. I even went to see a third doctor. I wanted to see, as a matter of fact, I was shopping around. And I wanted to know who had the best chances, whatever decision I would make, that would bring this through. What are the percentages of success? And as far as being able to control my bladder. How long would it take before I could have, let's face it, sex is an important part of life. How long would it take before I could get an erection? I didn't know. I didn't have answers to that. So I had to ask around. I had to shop around. And the fear was still there. And one of the first things that happened to sort of calm me down was that I found that there were people out there like Jean Paget and Robin and people that have been involved with giving out information and support, that there are people that you can talk to outside of the medical world. There are support groups. There are organizations. Jean made me discover there was Procure. I went to Procure. I found out. I read up. And I heard people that had been, in doubt. And when they got the information, they were confirmed in the fact that, well, maybe the fear factor doesn't necessarily need to be dealt with until the end of your life. Maybe you can understand things. Maybe you can, by talking to the people in those support groups, maybe you can get information. Maybe you can have a phone number. Maybe you can have an address. Maybe you can have somebody, somewhere, somehow, sometime that will be able to respond to your questions, give you answers to your questions. Now, as the doctor said before, things have evolved over the last 10 years, almost dramatically. There's new information out there, research, the biobank is doing a lot, and there's a lot of research, scientific research being made throughout the world. But when you do get these answers, and when you do become confident that, okay, this is one type of cancer. It can be dealt with, but how do I deal with my own life? How do I deal with my wife, my children? How do I maintain an emotional a relationship with the person I've been living with all these years, and how do I continue having an enjoyable sex life? These are all very important questions to address, to ask the questions, and hopefully get some answers. So you need to work on yourself also. You need to get help outside of the support group. Maybe you need to go to a therapist. Maybe you need to get special therapies in the sense of physiotherapy. There are a whole bunch there's a whole bunch of information out there that we can all access, that you can all access, that will help you go through the process. So fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is that you have questions. Some people have answers. You have questions about your cancer. You have questions about your prostate. You have questions about your psychological balance, your emotional balance. Those are questions that you need to be asking the right people, and the only way to do that is to go out there, not be afraid, and conquer your fears. J'aimerais, en conclusion, tout simplement dire aux gens qui sont venus ici ce soir que d'abord, c'est super sympathique de vous voir aussi nombreux, que deuxièmement, si je suis venu ce soir parler de la peur et comment ne pas avoir peur, c'est peut-être en faisant beaucoup de travail sur nous-mêmes et en n'ayant pas peur d'aller chercher toutes les ressources possibles et nécessaires pour vous amener à être le mieux possible et d'avoir le moins peur possible dans cette réalité qui est celle des gens qui sont atteints par le cancer de la prostate. Il y a Procure qui est là. Procure is a number and a website that you can refer to. There are others, of course, but the competence, la compétence des gens qui sont chez Procure est telle que vous n'aurez jamais une mauvaise réponse. Il ne faut jamais hésiter à aller vers ces gens qui sont véritablement prêts à vous aider, et je suis très fier d'en faire partie. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.